The corridor outside the maternity ward smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers, a strange mix of beginnings and endings. Nurses moved quickly, shoes squeaking softly against the polished floor, while new fathers paced with phones pressed to their ears, voices hushed and reverent. In the middle of it all stood the mother-in-law, rigid as a post, her lips pressed into a thin, unforgiving line. She had arrived with a purpose, and compassion was not part of it. Her eyes cut toward the young woman resting on the bed, pale and exhausted, a newborn sleeping quietly beside her. Instead of tenderness, the older woman's gaze carried accusation, as if the very act of giving birth had somehow been an offense. "You're not welcome here," she said sharply, her voice slicing through the fragile calm of the room. "You've caused enough trouble. Once you're discharged, you should leave. Don't think this baby changes anything." The words landed heavily, echoing against the sterile walls. The daughter-in-law tried to speak, but emotion clogged her throat. She had imagined many things about this day, but not this, being told to go, to disappear, at the very moment her life had split open to bring another into the world. The nurses exchanged glances, uncomfortable but bound by protocol. Family matters, they told themselves, even when cruelty masqueraded as authority. The young woman turned her face away, tears slipping silently into her hair. It felt like abandonment made official, stamped and approved by someone who was supposed to be family. The mother-in-law straightened her coat as if concluding a successful negotiation, already preparing to leave, convinced her power had gone unchallenged. Then the door opened. At first, no one recognized him. He was dressed simply, almost anonymously, without the armor of spectacle people expected. But there was no mistaking the presence once it registered. Post Malone stepped into the room with a quiet confidence that didn't ask for permission. The air changed instantly, like a pressure shift before a storm. Conversations in the hallway faltered. A nurse froze mid-step. The mother-in-law turned, irritation already forming on her face, ready to scold another interruption, until she saw who stood there. Her words vanished. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Post Malone looked past her, straight to the woman on the bed. His expression softened, concern written plainly across his face. He crossed the room without haste, as if this was exactly where he was meant to be, and gently asked how she was feeling. The simple question carried more kindness than all the sharp commands that had come before. He glanced at the baby, smiled, and nodded, acknowledging a life just beginning, a fragile miracle that deserved protection, not hostility. The mother-in-law finally found her voice, but it came out brittle. "And who are you supposed to be?" she demanded, though the tremor betrayed her. He turned to her then, calm but unyielding. "Someone who doesn't like seeing people treated this way," he replied. "Especially not here. Especially not now." The room held its breath. He didn't raise his voice, didn't posture or threaten. He didn't need to. His presence alone stripped the older woman of her assumed authority. She had come prepared to dominate, but not to be witnessed, not to be challenged by someone who carried both fame and an unmistakable moral weight. Her certainty crumbled under the quiet scrutiny. "You don't get to decide who belongs," he continued, evenly. "This isn't a train station where you tell someone they're headed the wrong way. This is a family moment. And if you can't be supportive, maybe you're the one who should step outside." The words were measured, deliberate, and devastating. The mother-in-law's face flushed, anger and humiliation battling for control. She wanted to argue, to reclaim the upper hand, but nothing came. The nurses relaxed almost imperceptibly, relief flickering across their faces. The young woman on the bed looked up, disbelief mixing with gratitude. For the first time since the confrontation began, she felt seen. News of the moment traveled fast, as moments like this always do. By the time Post Malone appeared later on The View, the atmosphere was already charged. The hosts welcomed him with practiced smiles, but tension simmered beneath the surface. Joy Behar, never one to shy away from provocation, leaned forward, her tone sharp as she referenced the incident. She framed it as spectacle, questioned motives, suggested performative heroism. The studio audience murmured, sensing the spark. Post Malone listened without interrupting, jaw tight, eyes steady. When he spoke, his voice carried the same calm intensity that had filled the hospital room. "There's nothing performative about standing up when someone's being hurt," he said. "Especially when they're vulnerable. If that makes people uncomfortable, maybe that discomfort is the point. Joy pushed back, dismissing it as celebrity interference in private family matters. That was when the shift happened. He sat forward, no longer relaxed, but resolute. Abuse doesn't become private just because it happens in a family, he said firmly. And silence helps the wrong people. I won't be silent about that. The exchange grew hotter, words overlapping, the audience divided between applause and uneasy silence. Joy tried to steer the conversation back, but he didn't retreat. He spoke about power, about how easily it's abused, about how often people look away because it's easier than intervening. His frustration wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. When he finally stood, thanking the hosts but making it clear he was done, the eruption wasn't explosive, it was controlled, intentional, and impossible to ignore. As he walked off the set, the studio buzzed with aftershocks. Some called it disrespectful, others called it necessary. Online, debates flared, clips replayed, opinions hardened. But back in the maternity ward, away from cameras and commentary, the moment had already done its work. The mother-in-law had left without another word, her authority dissolved. The young woman held her baby a little closer, the weight on her chest eased, replaced by something fragile but real, hope. In the end, it wasn't about fame or confrontation. It was about timing, about showing up when silence would have been easier. One moment in a hospital room, one moment on a television set, both bound by the same simple truth, that dignity isn't negotiable, and sometimes it takes an unexpected guest to remind everyone of that. The maternity ward was meant to be a place of quiet joy, a space where time slowed and the world narrowed to the rhythm of a newborn's breath. Yet that morning, tension clung to the walls like a storm that refused to break. The young woman lay propped against white pillows, her body aching, her heart raw with exhaustion and wonder. The baby beside her slept peacefully, unaware of the conflict brewing only a few steps away. What should have been a moment sealed in warmth was unraveling instead, thread by painful thread. Her mother-in-law stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes sharp and unyielding. From the moment she had arrived, the air had shifted. She did not ask how the birth went. She did not look at the baby with curiosity or affection. Instead, she came armed with judgment, convinced of her right to speak it aloud. "Don't get comfortable," she said coldly. "Once they release you, you're not coming back to our home. I warned my son about you. This changes nothing." Each word struck like a slap. The daughter-in-law felt heat rise behind her eyes but forced herself not to cry. She was too tired to fight, too vulnerable to defend herself properly. The idea that she could be cast aside so easily, at the very moment she became a mother, hollowed her out. Nurses hovered near the door, pretending to review charts, their discomfort obvious. No one intervened. No one ever seemed to intervene when cruelty wore the mask of family authority. "You rushed into a life that wasn't meant for you," the older woman continued, voice rising. "You're chasing the wrong future, the wrong station. Don't drag my grandchild into your mistakes." She straightened her scarf as if concluding a lecture, already satisfied with the damage done. In her mind, this was discipline, not cruelty. Then footsteps sounded behind her. The door opened quietly, without drama, yet the effect was immediate. A tall figure entered, tattoos peeking from under simple clothing, his presence grounded and unmistakable. Post Malone paused for a moment, taking in the scene, the pale young mother, the sleeping baby, the rigid older woman radiating hostility. He didn't need an explanation. Some moments announced themselves without words. The mother-in-law turned, irritation flashing across her face, ready to assert control again. Recognition hit her a second later, draining the color from her cheeks. Her mouth opened, but the practiced sharpness deserted her. Silence fell heavy and thick. Post Malone moved closer to the bed, his voice gentle as he asked the young woman how she was feeling. The concern was real, not performative. She answered quietly, surprised by the lump forming in her throat. When he smiled at the baby, something inside her loosened, a knot she hadn't realized was clenched. It was the first kindness she'd felt in hours. Only then did he turn to the mother-in-law. His expression wasn't angry, but it was firm, the kind of calm that left no room for argument. "This isn't the place for threats or ultimatums," he said. "If you're here to hurt someone, you should rethink why you came." The older woman bristled, humiliation and anger warring in her eyes. She tried to reclaim authority, to remind everyone who she was, but the balance had shifted. For the first time, she was being seen not as a matriarch but as a bully. The nurses stood straighter. The room felt steadier. "You don't get to decide who deserves support," he continued. "Not today. Not ever." There was no shouting, no theatrics. Just truth, spoken clearly. The mother-in-law said nothing. She gathered her things and left, heels clicking sharply down the corridor, each step an admission of defeat. Later, when Post Malone appeared on The View, the atmosphere was anything but gentle. The hosts welcomed him with practiced warmth, but the story had already ignited public debate. Joy Behar leaned in with skepticism, framing the hospital incident as unnecessary interference. "Families fight," she said pointedly. "Is it really your place to step in?" He listened, nodding slowly, then answered with controlled intensity. "It becomes everyone's place when someone's being pushed down," he said. "Especially when they can't stand up for themselves." Joy challenged him, suggesting that celebrity presence complicated private matters. That was when his patience thinned. He didn't raise his voice, but his words sharpened. "Being famous doesn't excuse silence," he said. "If anything, it means you have fewer excuses to look away." The exchange grew heated. Joy interrupted, he held his ground. He spoke about vulnerability, about how power often hides in family roles, about how easily cruelty is excused when it's familiar. The audience reacted in waves, applause, murmurs, tension crackling through the studio lights. When he finally stood up, signaling he was done, it felt less like a walkout and more like a line drawn. "I'm not here to make anyone comfortable," he said calmly. "I'm here to be honest." Then he left the stage, leaving behind a stunned silence that said more than applause ever could. In the days that followed, opinions flooded in from every direction. Some criticized him for overstepping. Others praised him for speaking up when it mattered. The story morphed and multiplied online, but its core remained unchanged. Back in the maternity ward, the young woman cradled her baby, replaying the moment again and again. She knew the future wouldn't suddenly become easy. There would still be hard conversations, fractured relationships, uncertain paths. But something fundamental had shifted. Someone had stood beside her when she was at her weakest, and that mattered more than public arguments or television debates. Sometimes, change doesn't arrive with grand speeches or perfect timing. Sometimes it comes quietly, through an unexpected guest who refuses to accept cruelty as normal. And long after the cameras stop rolling and the arguments fade, that quiet refusal is what lingers, steady and unforgettable.